Creating invoices and then collecting payments from your clients can sometimes become a tedious and manual process, especially when you're collecting those payments after you already delivered the project. You probably have another couple of projects lined up and waiting for you, but you still have to remember about following up with that last client who didn't complete or make their payment. So in this video, we will be building an automated system to help us do just that. So let's get started. Now, before we dive into actually testing and seeing how that system works, let me first walk you through a couple of kind of overall functionalities of the system so we know what to expect from it. The first thing, let's have a look at all the system components that we have. In this case, we have three main system components. It's going to be ClickUp as our project management software. Now, you can think about ClickUp as something where we manage all the tasks throughout the delivery of the project. So we have assignees there, we have the due dates for the tasks there. So we know when the project is completed as soon as, let's say, all the tasks is in ClickUp are completed. The next part is going to be Stripe. Stripe is going to be playing the invoicing and payment processing software part in here. We're going to be sending the link for customers to pay using Stripe. And all of that is going to be happening thanks to Zapier that will link and basically move data between Stripe and ClickUp, letting us know when the Stripe invoice is paid and what is the status of that invoice inside our ClickUp platform. Now, the primary goal of this system really is to make it easier for us to manage the invoices as we're sending them to our customers and to manage them all inside the same platform without switching multiple tabs or going to different platforms. We want it all to happen inside our project management software, which in this case is ClickUp. Now, as we looked at all the system components, let's quickly have a look at how do we expect that system to actually work. So what are all the functionalities that we expect to see as we're now going to be testing the system? The first part is going to be actually triggering the creation of the ClickUp invoice task. What that means, as soon as we have our project completed in ClickUp, inside ClickUp, meaning we've completed all the tasks for the project, we want a new task to be created that will be specific to the invoice. The reason why is because we want to track what are the main statuses of the invoice, whether the customer paid or not. Do we need to follow up with that customer? So we really want to have someone accountable for that task inside our system. And this is what we can see here. We trigger the creation inside ClickUp, the creation of that invoice task. That goes into Zapier, and inside Zapier, it creates the actual ClickUp task. It links it back to our project inside ClickUp. I'm going to show you how it works in just a second. And it updates our project status back, telling us the invoice task was generated correctly. Now, as now we have that separate invoice task in our ClickUp account and we have someone responsible for that task, now that person can trigger the sending of the Stripe invoice and payment link to the customer. This is the second part of the system that we see here on the diagram. And then again, it's going to happen inside ClickUp. We do not want people and our team members to go outside of ClickUp to perform this action. This should happen inside the same platform. This is why this information flows now from ClickUp into Stripe. Inside Stripe, we're going to create that personalized invoice and payment link that's going to be, again, linked and specific to that project for which we generated the invoice. So it can be a different amount, it can be a different client email to which we're going to be sending that invoice. So that all will be accounted for as part of the creation of the new invoice. And then that Stripe invoice is going to be sent using the email. And on our way back, as you can see here, just to end the loop, we're going to update our ClickUp invoice task status, making sure that we communicate to our team members that the automation was successful and the invoice was sent successfully. And now, as the last part, we've generated the task inside ClickUp to track the invoice status. We sent that invoice link to the customer. Now we need to make sure that when person completes the Stripe invoice payment, we also record that data back into ClickUp. And this is what you can see as the third diagram here on the screen. We have data flowing from Stripe into ClickUp, updating both our invoice task and our project task. And again, these diagrams might sound a little bit abstract, but I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of expectations from the system. And now it's going to be the most fun part, and we're going to be diving into testing the system. So let's get started. All right, so let's start testing the system. We're going to start with our ClickUp account. Here you can see we have a folder which we're going to be using for testing purposes, and inside the folder we have one list for projects. So this is where we are tracking the status of all the projects that we have in the company. For example, some of them are in progress. You can see some of them are in review status. One project is already accepted and the due date is set for today, so we can create the invoice for this specific project. Now, as we open the project, to keep it simple, we just have our customer email and project type custom fields. And as soon as we're creating or sending the invoice, we're going to be sending it to this specific email. So let's start with generating that or creating that invoice task for this specific project. In order for me to do that, I'm going to just go and change the status from accepted to completed, meaning that the project is successfully completed, client accepted it. And as soon as I do this, it should take a couple of seconds to process. We should see a new invoice task that is related to this project appearing over here. Now, in the meantime, as this is processing or the automation is running, let me show you how this simple Zapier scenario works. So in this scenario, we are waiting to hear from ClickUp as soon as we need to create that invoice task, and the status is changed on ClickUp, and we're creating that task, as you can see, and also using the API request inside Zapier, we're linking the invoice task to our project task. So if we go back into ClickUp, we can refresh the page and it should be appearing right here. So now you can see under relationships, we have our invoice task over here. The name of the invoice task is invoice for our project name. We can see the due date is for today, 2 p.m., meaning that we have to send this link not later than today, 2 p.m. So we're going to open that task and you can see it's over here. Now, in terms of the location of the task, you can see it's located under the invoice list. So it's a different list with a different set of statuses. So we're able to assign another person for this task. Let's say it can be me or it can be someone else from my team. And we also are able to track the specific statuses for this invoices, which are obviously different from the project statuses that we have in this list. Now, as we have our task created, let's go ahead and send that invoice to the customer. So I'm going to go and open this task over here. I'm going to go and create the send Stripe invoice checkbox in here. Now, as soon as we do this, the automation status should change to processing, as you can see over here, and it should be sending the invoice using the email or Gmail right now. So if I wait a couple of seconds, it should also update the automation status to successful, communicating back to us that the email was sent successfully to the customer, and I should be seeing that link to the invoice inside my inbox account. Now, as we're waiting for the invoice to come through, let me actually show you how this works on Zapier. So this is the Zapier scenario that actually works on the backend and sends this invoice link and generates that link as we're clicking that checkbox inside ClickUp. So it starts with, again, like some sort of catching all the updates that are happening in ClickUp that are specific to our scenario, which is updating the checkbox to checked. It also finds the task, the project task by ID. It finds the related invoice task. And then we have two different paths. The reason why is because when we first send the invoice, we need to generate the invoice from scratch. So we don't have that invoice yet in our Stripe system. But sometimes people might not respond or pay the invoice from the very beginning with the first email. So we also want to have the ability to resend the same invoice to the same customer. This is why path A is essentially sending the new invoice and generating that invoice for the customer. And path B is when we already have the invoice generated, we're just resending that invoice, reminding people that they have to make the payment. Now, as we were looking through the Zapier scenario, it actually updated our task. So you can see over here, it sent the comment saying invoice successfully created and sent, meaning that we created that invoice from scratch. If you remember that Zapier scenario we just looked at, and it also gave us some sort of feedback from the automation saying that the automation status is successful, the invoice is successfully sent and created, and we also have the Stripe invoice ID, which is a little bit more technical part. It's not needed for the actual user who is sending the invoice, but it's very, very helpful for us to make sure that we'll link the right invoice on Stripe with the right task inside ClickUp. Now let's go into my inbox and see how that invoice email looks from there. Now over here, you can see the invoice we received. It says payment request via Stripe. We have a nice email over here. It says, please take a moment to complete your payment. We can click the link pay via Stripe. It opens a new tab, and inside this tab, it's going to show us again an invoice that is due today. It's actually due tomorrow, and it lets me fill this out. Now I'm going to click on the card over here, and I'm going to fill out the name of the card. Just, by the way, not the real name of the card. This is just for testing purposes, so this is not my credit card information. I'm gonna apply these details here, and I'm gonna click on pay $1,000. But actually, before I click on pay $1,000, let me go back into my ClickUp task and resend that email, assuming that I've read the email, I saw the invoice, but I haven't paid it. So let's go back into ClickUp. We have this invoice over here task. It was successfully sent. Now we know when that invoice was sent. If it's been a couple of days and the customer did not pay and we haven't received any response, we can resend that email. And by clicking the same checkbox, it should do just that. So we're clicking the checkbox, we're waiting a couple of seconds, it should say processing over here, as you can see. Again, the status of the task also changed to sent from not sent. So this way we know where the invoice is at throughout the process, throughout the payment collection process. And if we give it a couple more seconds, it should return the automation status as successful, and it should resend another invoice link to us. Okay, so it says invoice successfully resent. So in this case, it was not created, it was not just sent, it was resent, because we're reusing the same invoice that was already generated for our customer. And if we go back to our inbox, let's see how it looks there. All right, so we got another email over here. Now we can see it 3:58 p.m. It was just sent, and we can see it's the same email, just reminding the person, please complete the payment. So now if we click that link, it should look absolutely similar. It should have the same amount, it should have the same customer over here. We just need to complete the payment. So now let's complete the payment, go back to our previous invoice that we filled out in here and click on pay $1,000. All right, so it's processed the payment over here. Now, as it's processed the payment, we should be receiving the update back into our ClickUp task, because as we mentioned, ClickUp is going to be a primary source of truth for us. So whatever is happening, whether we're completing the payment or resending the invoice, the most up-to-date information should be tracked and written back into our ClickUp task. So let's give it a couple of minutes and get back into our ClickUp account and see how that information looks now inside our invoice task in ClickUp. All right, perfect. It took actually a couple of seconds. I think it was like 20 seconds. And now we received that the invoice status is changed to paid over here. You can see that the comment was posted saying invoice successfully paid. So we can also mention some people over here, making sure that all the stakeholders have this communication for them. And then here at the bottom, you can see the Stripe invoice, which was attached to the invoice task in ClickUp. So it's really nice to have that in here. Now we could also upload this invoice, and also we have actually the receipt over here. So as you can see, it looks pretty nice. And we could also upload this invoice, both invoice and receipt, to our Google Drive folder or maybe Dropbox folder for our client, so we can keep track of all the invoices that we sent and all the payments that we received for our bookkeeping purposes. But as soon as the invoice is paid, we can also say that the project is successful. So now as we go back to our relationship and we switch back to our project Flow Forge, we can see that the status of the project was switched from completed into closed, meaning that now we can finally have, or everyone who worked on this project so hard can now have a day off, or I'm just kidding, just relax and enjoy this moment. We received the payments and now the project is officially closed. Now, as we haven't completed project as well as the completed invoice, let me quickly show you the last piece of the puzzle that is working on Zapier. Now, this scenario over here listens to all the notifications that are coming from Stripe. So again, as soon as the payment is made, we want files and PDF files to be uploaded into our ClickUp task, and also the statuses of those tasks to be updated. So this is what's happening over here. We're listening to the notification at the top, and now over here we are updating our related invoice task. And again, this is why we're sending the personalized Stripe link to the customer, so that as soon as we hear back from Stripe that they're saying the invoice was successfully paid, we know exactly which invoice we need to refer to inside our ClickUp account. So this is what's happening here. Now we're also posting a comment, if you remember that comment that says invoice was successfully paid. And as the last piece, we're updating the project status to close, to let everyone know that the payment was successfully collected and that the project is finally closed. Now, as we have our project closed and all the payments completed, maybe we can finally have a good and quiet weekend. So I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next videos very, very soon.